Hi, Andrea here from Astropills, your weekly updated blog about astrophotography. And this week we are going to talk about focusing on stars. Focusing on stars with standard photographic equipment is quite challenging. If anything, because stars are small, they move, they are faint, and the autofocus will not lock on them 99% of the time. So what you need to do is to find an alternative way to focus on stars rather than using autofocus. Most of the people say, okay, if you cannot use autofocus at night, you can still use it at day, so why not pre-focusing your camera, your lens, on a distant object in daylight, lock the focus, and then wait for the night and the stars to appear and start your astrophotography session. Now that strategy is failing almost everything. Also every time. There is no it is really not a good strategy for at least 4 different reasons. The first one is that you may have a camera or a lens that resets itself when the camera goes off. So that's the typical case of bridge cameras or compact cameras, or also lenses where the focus is electronic. You focus by wire. So you turn off the camera, the lens resets itself, your focus is gone, and you are back to square one. The other reason is temperature. If you are focusing in daylight, daytime, at nighttime, the temperature will be wildly different, and that can introduce a focus shift. So your focus that was okay in daytime at higher temperature, at night, with lower temperature, will not be spot on anymore. Again, back to square one. The other reason is that the focus can change with your focal length. So if you have a zoom lens, like I have here, I have a 12-40 millimeters on my Olympus OMD. If I use the 40 millimeter to pre-focus in daytime, and then I go under the stars and I want to make take a photos of the whole Orion constellation, I quickly realized that 40 millimeter are giving me a field of view that is too narrow for the Orion constellation. So I have to go back to 25 millimeter. That will introduce a focus shift, again back to square one. The last reason is another very simple. Some lenses has a focusing ring that is rather stiff, other is very smooth. So when you manipulate your camera, you put it in your bag to go on location after you have pre-focus, you are mounting something, you can easily lose your focus. You can say, okay, I tape the focus ring down with gaffer tape, but that may solve one of the 4 issues that we just saw. So overall, the strategy is not really a good strategy. So how we can focus at night on stars? Well, first of all, we go back to manual focus. And then we use the LCD screen. Now, this is a fully orientable LCD screen. Hopefully, you have one similar in your camera, and that is very useful because you can still see your LCD screen comfortably, even if the camera is tilting upwards and it's mounted on a very low tripod. You don't have to engage in contortionism in order to see your LCD screen. Now, once you can see your LCD screen, what you do is to use live view, again standard on many cameras nowadays. You use live view to magnify a bright star on your screen, and you start focusing, and you look at sign that your focusing is going to be better and better and better. The first sign you're looking for is the size of the stars you have on the LCD screen. When the stars is out of focus, you will see it like a bright, big blob of light on your screen. More you focus on the star, smaller the blob becomes, more sharp, more defined, until you have a pinpoint star on your LCD. The second sign you are looking for is that while you are doing this process of minimize the size of the stars, you may notice that many other fainter stars will appear on screen. That's because you have focused on them as well. Before they were out of focus and the large blob was not too bright and could not be seen. So now you have reduced the size of your stars. You have more stars that appear on the LCD screen. And the last sign is chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration is something that we usually want to avoid, but we cannot always get rid of it. And what is known is that you can reduce the amount of chromatic aberration by improving your focus. And you can see that when you are out of focus, you have massive purple or blue fringe around the star, and then more you close in, more these fringes get smaller and smaller, and you aim to minimize their impact on the image. So the problem is that all of these three signs are non-quantitative. You have still to able their effect and decide, is it okay, is it not okay. So in time people came up with some focusing device, and mostly for telescope. So here we have my Skywatcher SkyMax 90, that is catadioptric telescope, is 1250 millimeter in focal length. And what people do with this kind of telescope is to use a Bahtinov mask. The Bahtinov mask is something like that. Is a piece of plastic where you have some gaps that are oriented, some cuts that are oriented in three different directions. One direction, two direction, three direction. What you do is you take your telescope, you frame a bright star, you pop the star on the mask on the telescope, and you will notice that around the star we have now some diffraction spikes. So what you do is to use those spikes to confirm and improve your focus. How it works? It's very simple. The three different directions of the cuts will produce three different spikes that are oriented along different directions in the frame. So let's take these chopsticks as diffraction spikes. So one set of cuts will produce a spike that is in this direction, that is centered on the star. The other set of cuts will create the second spike, again centered on the star. So the point where the two spikes cross is where the star is. And the beauty of the Bahtinov mask is that it creates a third spike. This spike is different from the other two in the sense that these spikes can move up and down depending on the focus. So if you are out of focus, you may have this kind of diffraction pattern. And more you focus in, more the third spike goes down to intercept the crossing where the other two cross. So a focus with the Bahtinov mask will produce a pattern that is in this way, where all the three spikes cross in a point, and that point is where the star is. If you overshoot the focus, then the spikes will continue to move forward and downwards. So the beauty of the Bahtinov mask is that by having this spike moving with respect to the reference ones, you have some kind of quantitative way to quick adjust your focus. And this is very consistent and is very precise. So why don't we do the same with photographic lenses? We do. In the market you can find Bahtinov masks that have been commercialized for DSLR camera. You see that with respect to the one for telescope, they are smaller, of course, because we don't have photographic lenses that are as large as telescopes, and they just fit nicely your lens, and you could shoot. Problem is that most of the time a Bahtinov mask will not work on a photographic lens. And this is because depending on the focal length of your lens or telescope, you have to adjust the width of these gaps, of these cuts. So you may notice already that the one on the mask for the telescope, the gaps are much wider than the one for the lenses. But if you use a wide-angle lens, this cut here must be much more narrow. I bought this one, and the only lens that show me some diffraction spikes and not very strong is this one, which is a 300mm lens that on my camera will give equivalent, give a field of view equivalent to a 600mm lens on a full frame camera. So anything shorter than that will not work with the Bahtinov mask. That's my experience. So what can we do next? If you want to have a Bahtinov mask, you can look online for a Bahtinov mask generator, which create templates that you can feed to a 3D printer and 3D print your custom Bahtinov mask for your lens. Basically, you will have the possibility to tune the width of these cuts. But there is a more dirty trick you can do it. And so one day I was looking in the kitchen to find a way to mimic a Bahtinov mask, and I saw this kitchen sieve, the one you use to filter your tea. And I noticed that in the metallic net, of course, have some holes, and these holes are squared and are much finer in size than the cuts we have here. So I tried to pop this device in front of my lens and take a picture of stars. And what I saw is that I was able to produce diffraction spikes. Because the gap here are square and not cut like that, and we don't have separate or different orientation, what we have is a different pattern of diffraction spikes. So basically here with this kitchen sieve, we will not have the classic Bahtinov mask pattern, something like that. But indeed what you have two spikes like that are dotted here, and they do not move in time with the focus. They are still crossing at the star, and what you aim is to have those spikes as defined as possible, as sharp as possible, as contrasted as possible, while is still not as objective, quantitative as the Bahtinov mask. Is much less of a guessing job to get the right focus with this kind of device. Now, the last thing I want to say is that keeping this in front of your lens while you are trying to focus, well, is not an easy job, is not a simple job, and is not a safe job, because this metal ring can actually get in contact with the glass of your lens and scratch it. So we can improve this design, and we can use a step-down ring. So a step-down ring is a ring that adapts a filter with a small diameter to be mounted on a lens of a larger diameter. So this is a 58 to 52 millimeter step-down ring, meaning that this allows me to mount a 52 millimeter filter on a 58 millimeter lens. Now the difference between the two diameters give me this flat edge here, which is very nice, and I can use this flat edge to glue a metallic net. Metallic net that I take from here. That is, I don't know the English name. This is what you use to cover a fry pan when you are frying, so that the oil will not go and spill everywhere. And it's the same kind of net you find in the kitchen sieve. So what I do, I cut a piece of that, I glue my ring, I glue it on my ring, and now I can screw it. I can screw it on the lens and nothing gets scratched. Everything is very stable. As usually, I suggest you to try this method, and after you think you have a good focus, remove the focusing device, either this or a Bahtinov mask, and take a test shot to confirm that you have achieved a good focus. And this is pretty much what are your possibilities to quickly focus on stars. And at Astropage we are creating a series of cheat sheets, and this is the one on focusing stars. It's basically an infographic with all the information that I detailed in this video, and you can download it for free, of course. And here you have a QR code that will, or the address of the page where you can download that, and with explanation of the procedure and of the full and all the symbols. So with this, thank you for watching and see you next week.